We're nearly finished with our overview of Strapi. One of the last things I wanted us to take a look at before we jump into fully building out the backend for our application is services. Services are reusable functions of common functionality that help keep your backend code dry. Let's go over to the Strapi documentation for some more details. Here I am at strapi.io on the left-hand side under Concepts and Services. Like I said, services are a set of reusable functions, and their primary purpose is to simplify controller logic. Okay, so we've gone over controllers, and services are really for extracting out common pieces of functionality that you find yourself having to implement over and over within your controllers. So if you find yourself working in your controllers and setting up some of the business logic for your application, and you notice that there are some functions or some things that you need to do more than once, well, that's probably a good use case to create a service for that function and then simply call that service each time instead of duplicating the functionality. Just like with all of the other Strapi concepts that we've covered so far, we can both extend the default services as well as create our own custom services. Let's actually open up the controllers concept for just a second. I'll open that in a new tab. And here, if we go down to some of the default controllers, say here the find controller. If we look at the code for this, we see here is the controller defined function find, but inside of that function, we have the if block that searches or checks rather if we have a search query. Otherwise, it just does a regular lookup. Okay, but how it performs this find lookup is by calling the Strapi services restaurant find. Okay, so this is the find controller, but it's calling the Strapi find service for that content type. Okay, so if we go back over to the services tab and we scroll on down, here we see examples of what that function actually looks like. So this find function here is this find function here from the controllers. Okay, so hopefully that ties those two concepts together for you. So just like all of the other examples that we looked at, we can extend these defaults by copying the current implementation that they've provided for us here, and then we would open up our code editor, and under API and then our content type of article, there we have a services folder and the article.js services. Here we could open up our module.exports, or actually it's already included for us, and so we would simply paste it here, and now we could go in and customize the functionality for the find service if that's what we wanted to do. So you see, you really do have complete control over all the functionality that is going on in Strapi. It just provides so much for us right out of the box that it's really nice that they also provide us with such an easy system for extending all of that functionality that they provide to us. Okay, so that would be how you could extend the services if you wanted to do that. But let's just flip on back over to the documentation. And like some of this other stuff, we'll get more into the actual specifics later and more of the details whenever we actually build out the functionality in our application that will use this. For example, in one part of our application, we're going to need to go through the user's cart that they submit when they're going to make a purchase and make sure that we have the correct prices for all of the items. So what we'll probably do is write a service that goes through a cart. It'll expect a cart and it'll go through it for us and get the price for us, so that anywhere else in our code where we need to verify the prices in the cart, we could just call that service. Okay, so that actually goes right into the custom services, the next part of this documentation. And here it gives an example of an email service using NodeMailer, which you might recognize from my previous course if you've taken that. And so once they define the node mailer, the transporter, and then a function to send the email to a specified recipient, then down here in their code, they can call strapi.services.email.send and pass it the information it expects. So this is exactly what we'll be doing later on. I just wanted you guys to be aware of the fact of the concept of services and how they relate to the code within our controllers. So this should give you the final piece of how all this is working. So it's coming back to our services. And remember, the main concept to take away here is that anytime you're working with controllers and finding yourself repeating certain business logic, that is where you need to then extract that into a service. So just keep that in mind as we go out and work on our application and yourself on your own personal projects.